Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another daily movie review. Today we're going to be talking about the 2001 film Hannibal. It is directed by Ridley Scott, written by David Mamet, Steve Zalian, adapted from a Thomas Harris novel of the same name. It stars Anthony Hopkins, Julianne Moore, Gary Oldman, Ray Liotta, Frankie Faison, Giancarlo Giannini, Francesca Neri, Zizek Ivanek, Hazel Goodman, and others. The plot synopsis logline is: living in exile, Dr. Hannibal Lecter tries to reconnect with now disgraced FBI agent Clary Starling and finds himself a target for revenge from a powerful victim. So there you go. There's Hannibal. Goodbye. Just kidding. So today is October 6th. Well, the day you're going to see this is October 6th. That's the day it premieres. And of course, you're going to watch this as soon as it drops. Just immediately. You're going to see it in your inbox. You're going to be like, shit. Fuck, another daily movie review. Boom, 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 boom. Well, it's my birthday today. And I had another movie that I had watched before this. And I was like, I am not fucking talking about this on my birthday. It's not happening. So for some reason, I was just like, oh, I'm going to do Hannibal. I talked about Manhunter and its remake or its other version of Red Dragon, the Brett Ratner Hackfest. We talked about that like a week or two ago. And it put Hannibal in my mind. I wanted to revisit Hannibal, it's a weird movie. I always come back to this movie. I don't know why. It is a weird movie. It's kind of an unwieldy movie. It's a little all over the place movie, but there's something very watchable, something very interesting about the movie. And I was a fan of these movies from a very young age. You know, I saw Silence of the Lambs when I was probably 11 or 12. And I watched it with my mom too. I have distinct memories of buying the VHS and watching it with my mom. Yeah, which is weird because my mom's not like a big movie person. It was more of a thing I did with my dad, but for some reason she likes thrillers and police procedurals, FBI stuff, you know. And anyway, so I was a fan really when I was really young, and when the book Hannibal came out, it only came out like a year or two after I was kind of acclimated to the world of Thomas Harris and Hannibal Lecter as a character. I used to get in trouble in school. I went to a Catholic school, and when I first went there, you know, kids like to decorate the inside of their lockers and stuff. I had pictures of Anthony Hopkins from Silence of the Lambs, and I had a bunch of They Live pictures and aliens and propaganda and all sorts of weird, goofy shit. I mean, yeah, definitely. So I was probably around 13 or so. I still laugh about that, but I got in trouble. I got in trouble for it. All the teachers be like, you know, we're a little concerned. We're concerned about you. What is all this serial killer stuff? I'm like, it's a fucking movie character. What are you talking about? Serial killer. It's not a real serial killer. Like fucking insane shit. Also, the They Live aliens is like, they look demonic. These are demons. I was like, well, you know, kind of. I guess in some sort of perspective, you could say they're demons. Of course, I was just an awful smartass. I think I got myself in trouble. That's like how I introduced myself to this school. This very small Catholic school in where the fuck was it? Somewhere in Massachusetts, somewhere in sleepy Massachusetts. Long Meadow? No, it wasn't Long Meadow. I can't remember right now. Turner's Falls, that's where it was. It was in Turner's Falls, Massachusetts. That's where it was. Yeah, so I was fascinated. I read this book. I read Hannibal around when it came out. So the book comes out in 1999. I probably read it 2000. I think my grandfather had a copy of it, and I was just like, hey, can I have this? And he's like, sure. Yeah, you know, let the children read. Anything to encourage a child to read, because he read it, and then he had it laying around his house or whatever. I used to work for my grandparents when I was a kid, and yeah, somehow I ended up getting possession of it and reading it. And it's a weird, goofy book. It's not totally out of step with what comes before. You know, if you were to look at, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, Black Sunday is actually technically the first one of these stories of the Lecter series, but he's a very minor character in Black Sunday. Thomas Harris was really more into criminal profiling, serial killers, that kind of thing. Hannibal, while is like a big character, the reason why he's so famous is because of Silence of the Lambs, the movie. Because he's such a big part of that movie. He became so iconic. It kind of changes the direction of things. And Thomas Harris took him a long time to put a sequel out, a novel sequel, or another one in the series, and it directly deals with the character Hannibal Lecter. He becomes a much more centralized focus. It's not like Lecter as being a secondary character while they're trying to hunt down like a serial killer. And it's a goofy book. Not in a bad way, It's not. I wouldn't say it's in a bad way. It's goofy, but it is a different thing. So much so that when the original team that made the film Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme, Jodie Foster, Ted Talley, the screenwriter, they were like kind of so taken aback by the weird direction that it goes that they actually dropped out of the project. They had said for years, they said, of course, our team is totally going to be involved in whatever sequel comes out. And Thomas Harris had talked about that he was writing a sequel. It would come out at some point. It's only, if you think about it in the context of time, it's really only a few years after Silence of the Lambs. When Silence of the Lambs comes, 1991. So there's only a 10-year gap actually between the movie releases, which isn't really that long. And it's probably, I think it's around the same amount of time that the characters actually would have spent apart. So it's interesting in that way. So for that, they weren't even waiting that long. They were waiting 7 or 8 years for him to complete something, and they just were not into it. And because the movie is very excessive, or not the movie, rather, the novel and the movie, I guess, is excessive. It's gory. It's campy. The ending is considered very controversial. It's kind of a weird recontextualization about the nature of the relationship between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling in a way that makes people really uncomfortable, because it almost takes Lecter's side to a certain degree, or at least makes excuses. And then you have like kind of this one person, this one hero that had stood to him and kind of beat him a little bit. I mean, granted, he gets away at the end of Silence of the Lambs, but she beat him on some sort of like philosophical level, whereas he could not like really corrupt her. He could not get her to see things from his perspective. But in Hannibal, he kind of does. And then it's a different kind of story. It's a much more horror oriented story. It feels much more in line with that than kind of the classy thriller, the prestige thriller that Silence of the Lambs was. So coming to the movie, Ridley Scott ends up taking over. He's coming off of Gladiator. He's a kind of a hot commodity, a prestige director again. He's kind of come back into the fold. And Ridley Scott is another guy. He's super talented. Obviously, he's another one of these dudes who can basically do any genre he wants to because he has the fundamentals down pat. It's always cool though when you see him actually like have some sort of like real passion for something and he really goes the extra mile. I'd say that even in movies that I didn't like, he directed that I didn't love, like Prometheus or Alien Covenant, you could tell he's like really into what he's doing. He's having some fun. Hannibal feels a little bit more like a jobber, just a little bit. It has kind of a flatness to the quality, and it's like most of the mood and stuff like that, the cinematic like nature of it feels like it's done by the DP more than by his hand. The movie feels a little flat. It's interesting. One of the most interesting things about Hannibal, and I think that's why it's such a curiosity for me and why I keep coming back to it, is that it is very campy and silly, but not filmed that way. It is not tipping its hat to you that it's like from like a visual style. There's no director identifiers that tell you that you're watching kind of like this high camp horror movie, but it is. And I would say even the performances and the characters themselves are, and all that goes back to the material. This is actually a very faithful adaptation for the most part of the novel. It is very straightforward. And everybody feels in line tonally with what the novel is trying to accomplish. And I think the movie largely executes on it, even if I think Scott is a little bland here. A little bland. Maybe that's unfair. I don't know. But there's almost like this anonymous thing. Like if somebody didn't tell me that Ridley Scott directed it, I couldn't like pull this out of a lineup. You know, it just feels workmanlike. Which, you know, I think he was tired too. He had just come off of I know he had just done Gladiator. And so when did this come out? 2000. Let's look real quick here. Let's have some fun today. It's my birthday. Come on. So this comes out. Oh, Jesus Christ. This guy does nothing but work. The guy does nothing but make movies. Okay, so yeah, he's coming off of, I mean, he did White Squall, G.I. Jane, Gladiator, Hannibal, goes into Black Hawk Down, Matchstick Men, Kingdom of Heaven. Jesus, like he is such a he's got a body of work that is incredibly like varied. It's actually kind of cool if you really think about it. If you really start to think about it, guys, it's actually really cool. But so yeah, I think maybe there was a little bit of a fatigue there. Even though he seems indefatigable, he's so prolific. The guy works all the fucking time. He's always got like 3 projects in the hopper, and he's just ready to go. And he's like still doing that, and he's in his 80s. And he's become much more ponderous, man. I appreciate where he's gone, especially with the sci-fi stuff, where it's either Raised by Wolves, this new HBO Max show, which is basically like, hey man, this is what I wanted to really talk about with Prometheus. So we just made a show because they're not going to let me do that. Yeah, I think he was probably a little tired. I think that's probably the culprit for some of how Hannibal is. Wow, where do we even start? We're 11 minutes in, and we've barely even begun to speak about this film. I think that the performances are all in line as well with this camp nature, especially Hopkins. Hopkins seems like he's having a really good time in this movie. Maybe too much of a good time, in the sense where like all reality of the character has just been like taken out. Like he's just like, he kind of knows that he's a little bit of like a pulp villain. It's like comic book villain. I mean, Lecter's always kind of had like a sardonic sense of humor, you know, even going back to the fucking Silence of the Lambs, you know, oh, and Senator, love your suit. Like, so he's always kind of been like that. And he definitely has some really great moments too. Like, okie dokie, like these weird little choices. And I think Hopkins nails it. Like he has picked a tone. He's made some choices as an actor, and he does it. I don't think that's maybe not going to work for everybody, and it does seem like sometimes it can kind of come in and out, but that also can be the character making decisions about when they want to kind of engage in that kind of attitude. Because sometimes he's a much more thoughtful, sensitive person, and then suddenly he kind of switches into supervillain mode, it's fun. I think it's a fun performance. Julianne Moore, she does fine, but again, just because she does like this bad accent, she does this bad southern like affectation. It's not very good, but it works for the movie though, because it kind of just lends itself to the nature of the film and the campiness and whatnot. And one of my favorite performances in the movie though, he's not a big part of the movie, is Ray Liotta as Paul Krendler. He plays a great dirtbag. He's such the slimy, shitty, misogynistic co-worker of Agent Starling's, Julianne Moore's, and he's such a gross piece of shit. And he does it so well. He just nails it. And he's kind of the thing in a lot of ways that is a representative and like writ large of kind of one of the subtexts and themes of the movie. Because I think if anything, this is really what the movie kind of drew out of the novel, because you have like somebody that's more of a seasoned FBI person at this point. Like she made it her bones with this Hannibal Lecter case from the Silence of the Lambs movie and book. And she's had to deal with like a lot of like resentment from other field agents and her coworkers. And then there's this kind of permeating sense of misogyny and sexism that she has to deal with on a daily basis. Like it's constantly brought up. This is something that's also very present in the novel. It's one of the reasons why in the novel, when it ends the way it does, with Starling basically running away with Hannibal at the end of the book, is because this is one of the things that points you in that direction, is that Hannibal, for all of his faults, all of his proclivities as a cannibal, is a gentleman. And he sees Starling as a peer. He respects her. He does not denigrate her. He is disgusted by rudeness, especially towards her. Hannibal has an affinity for her. You could say a love for her. In the novel, it manifests as a love. In the movie, it manifests as a love, but it does not feel very earned, and not in the same way. They just do not have the same levels of parallel because they cut out some characters. There's definitely too much streamlining, and Hannibal and Starling's relationship never feels like it is the same, is as effective as it is in the novel in terms of earning that ending. In the movie, they decided not to do that, as you probably know. She doesn't run away with Hannibal, and she is the archetypal Starling to the end. She is the warrior. She is this person of principle. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how Hannibal feels about her. And she is undeterred even through all like the things that she has to deal with in her life. It doesn't, So in the movie, it probably wouldn't have added up, but I wish they kind of just fucking went for it. I wish they had just paid more attention to like this weird psycho burgeoning romance between Starling and Hannibal that's happening through basically like through letters and her chase of Hannibal in the book. It does not like clearly enough communicate those things, at least not early enough. It's not seated in there, which makes the sexism and the misogyny stuff like a little hollow, because in the book, it definitely is something that helps in the building and the earning of a moment. And in the movie, it's just kind of there as in like, oh, aren't these people horrible? She just got to deal with this shit. Like, can you believe what women have to deal with? Which, trust me, they do. Trust me, as the husband of somebody that works with a bunch of like shitty good old boys type people with that type of attitude. Definitely, I've seen it firsthand. It's really gross. It can be gross because it's not. It should be a meritocracy, but it's not. Anyways, whatever. Yeah, and the movie kind of just decides not to go there, and I do think it makes the movie a little less interesting for sure, because it plays out more like a straightforward kind of cat and mouse revenge movie. You got Gary Oldman's character, Mason Verger, the maimed pedophile, a very wealthy man who's basically just dedicated his life to finding Hannibal Lecter and getting revenge. Because Hannibal, he finds people like Mason Verger contemptuous. He does not respect or support their things. And Mason Verger was a client of Hannibal's, and he was a pedophile and an abuser. And Hannibal gets him to think that he's like coming on to him, and he gets invited to his house, and then through use of drugs and manipulation gets him to cut his own face off and feed it to his dogs. And Mason, obviously not very happy about that. He's not super stoked about that. And Gary Oldman, coming in classic Gary Oldman fashion, just fucking chews the fuck out of the scenery, and it is another one of my favorite performances in the movie for different reasons than Ray Liotta. But it is one of these things where it's like, oh, this is a very Gary Oldman performance. Like, Gary Oldman could really sink his teeth into this kind of stuff. And I love the line delivery. I love his attitude. I love it. And he knows what kind of movie he's in. He knows what kind of story that they're actually telling. And it's a lot of fun. I love it. It's so creepy and gross. He's so fucking slimy. And he does a couple of these like great Gary Oldmanisms. And a lot of times in Gary Oldman movies, he does like a crazy accent or whatever, but he'll always deliver a line where he like drops it all and just gives this like really deep like voice delivery of something. He's like, oh, Agent Starling. He's like, it was interesting that I talked about all these horrible things and you did not flinch, but once I invoked the name of God, you shuddered. I love that shit. I love it. I really do. It makes things like this it reminds you that Scott was smart enough not to take himself completely serious with the material, because it's campy. It's a little over the top. It's silly. Even in the novel, like, it is that way. And I think Jonathan Demme and Jodie Foster definitely responded in a way where they felt it came out of left field. It really does. Maybe someday I'd like to revisit the novel, I could see myself listening to this on audiobook. Maybe not committing to reading it, but I could listen to it again. Because there is a ton of stuff that is cut out. Mason Verger, most of his role in the movie gets completely relegated to this kind of, I don't know, like just a revenge guy, just wealthy revenge dude who wants revenge. In the book, it's way more interesting, way more nuanced. He has a sister that basically he has like a helper in this movie that kind of is a stand-in for his like verbal abuse. But his sister is like this kind of traumatized woman, and he has all of this kind of like sadistic shit that he's done to her over the years and all of this stuff. And it's another one of these things that also parallels Starling's kind of journey about like a woman trying to make it in the world and the men that she has to deal with. And then, but the kind of the loyalty she has, Starling, because her loyalty to kind of the notions of justice and the agency. Mason Verger's sister, I'm blanking on her name at the moment, is to her brother and her family. Like she almost, I think in some ways feels like she can save the soul of her brother. So it makes her stay around, and then he manipulates her and all this stuff. It's very interesting. Actually, if you want to check out the television show Hannibal, which actually feels very in line with this movie. It's actually, I would say that the show's better than this movie, but the tone is very similar to this movie, for sure. I've really wanted to revisit that too, but the Mason Verger stuff in the show is way more close to the novel, close to the source material, and I think actually does a much better job making that character not only just like gross and disgusting, but it also makes this the character of Margot Verger, that's her name, becomes much more. She's actually in it and parallels kind of the journeys of the other characters. So it's interesting. Yeah. It's a fun movie. I don't know why I keep coming back to it, honestly. I think I watched this twice this year. I watched it, I don't know, before COVID. So it must have been like January or February. And then for whatever reason, the other day, it's because I watched Red Dragon and Manhunter. That's why. So there is a reason. There's a very specific reason. It just put it in my head. And I bought this Blu-ray for like $4. HamiltonBooks.com, everybody. And I was like, gotta get it. Gotta get to it. It's not streaming on anywhere anymore. Gotta watch it. Gotta get to it, baby. And I don't know. I like it in spite of itself a little bit. I don't know if it all completely works. Like I said, I think the tone is never really successfully achieved what they're going for. And it has moments of incredible self-awareness about the kind of movie that it is, and then other times where it just isn't. And I do not think Julianne Moore really understood the kind of movie she was making, which is weird because everybody else seems to be clued into it. Like everybody else does except for Julianne Moore. I have to imagine that's a choice between her and Ridley Scott to have her kind of be the most normal. As a comparison to all the madness that she has to deal with, whether it's like the office politics and the sexism, or Hannibal, or the Vergers, or fucking just everything that she's involved in. Like she has to be something that stands aside from it, stands differently from it. I have to imagine that was the case, but it does make for a weird dissonance, a cognitive dissonance between what you're watching and what you know you're supposed to be like kind of getting from it. So, I don't know. It's worth a revisit. If you have not seen Hannibal in a long time, maybe since like it came out, like I'd say go give it a go. Give it a spin if you can find it. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere right now, honestly. So this is why you got to buy physical media, folks. Okay, that's why you got to buy physical media, baby. Because you never know. Like Hannibal was on Netflix for years. And then, of course, the day you go to look for it, it's not going to be there. You're going to shell out that $4. Cancel your Netflix. Just start buying movies. You'll appreciate them more. That's my lesson of the day. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. If you would like to know more about Zoobox, a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my Twitter, for Dan's Twitter. Also, if you would like to make a recommendation for one of these daily videos, throw it in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to it. It's horror season. I'm doing a lot of these in advance, but they will come. I'm going on vacation, so there's going to be a point where I catch up. So if you throw something in the October videos, throw me a horror movie. I'm doing all horror movies for October, and horror adjacent things. So if you have something that you're like, well, this is not like traditionally a horror movie, but it's like a psychological thriller or something, we'll go with that. We'll do that this month. All right, everybody. You have the best one ever. Happy birthday to me.